Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. Yeah, here to finish up my series that I started. 2 years ago, where where I do a year in review of a WWF, WWF, or sometimes I did WCW year in review, and I go and I talk about my thoughts and memories in that specific year. We started with 1993, way back in 2022. Then from there went to 1994, 1995, 1996, 1997, 1998. We backtracked a little and did 1990 and 1991 and 1989. And finally, we're here at 1999. A little back, we always like to do the backstory, the back year, the year before. That's the year. Lisa is talking about, okay, Lisa saying no Whitney's mom video. Whitney's mom, Lisa, I wasn't for sure if you were available. Um, and I wanted to do the video with you because I know how big of a huge Whitney Houston fan and Sissy Houston fan you are. So that's why I chose not to do it. But we can, I, I could have messaged you, that's true. We can delete this video and do it do that, or we can continue on with this video. um so here's what you want to do. Lisa says Sexy Red was on Monday Night Raw. Yeah, she was. um she works heavily with Shawn Michaels and Triple H. Shawn Michaels, of course, head of creative, and Triple H, head of creative. An interesting segue into the video we're doing now. Shawn Michaels and Triple H. Um, their year in 1998. Both of those guys had a tremendous year in 1998. Well, Shawn Michaels, I guess, you wouldn't call the year he had tremendous. You know what I mean? He got a lot of mainstream exposure in the Stone Cold Steve Austin feud with where he took on Stone Cold Steve Austin and um, with Mike Tyson as a special guest referee, defended the WWF Championship against Austin. But after that, because of the injury he suffered at the Royal Rumble at the hands of The Undertaker, he then dropped out of the WWE, and they thought he would never wrestle again. He was well enough to do WrestleMania 14, but after that, that was it for him. You know, Tyson turns on him. He does the legit count after Michaels gets the stunner, and then Michaels says, "Well, Mike, you're supposed to be with me. You're supposed to be with me." And then Tyson knocks him out, and then Tyson waves the Stone Cold Steve Austin T-shirt around, hence meaning that Mike Tyson's out of DX. We don't see Shawn Michaels really until the end of 1998, after 2 weeks after the Survivor Series. We talked about in the 1998 video, the Survivor Series, Vince Russo's magnum opus. Vince Russo, now the new head writer and slash booker for the WWF. The Attitude Era is in full swing. His magnum opus was the Survivor Series Deadly Game pay-per-view. They relive the 1997 Survivor Series with their own fake screw job. Vince McMahon and his son screw Mankind, the guy that they've been grooming since after WrestleMania to be the guy in various forms, whether it was Mankind or Dude Love or whomever. They screw him and they choose their corporate champion, The Rock. And The Rock becomes the WWF champion for the first time ever. And the first and in actuality, the first, and this is topical now since Triple H is coming under fire for not having a lot of black talent. But this is very, and Vince, of course, when he was in charge of WWE, he also came under that sort of scrutiny. Well, he made history here as The Rock becomes the first black man ever to hold the WWF Championship. Now, people say, well, he's Samoan, right? They emphasize his Samoan heritage. They will later on, but I think at this time in 1998, they went in the late 90s, they emphasized his black heritage way more. I mean, let's remember in 1997, when he first turned heel, he turned heel by joining the Nation of Domination. Back when the Nation of Domination was actually an all-black faction in 1997. Of course, Owen Hart would later join, right, in 1998, and before that, in 1996, it was a multiracial faction with Savio Vega and Crush. But in 19, and we talked about all that, in the 1998 video and in the 1996 video with the Nation. But in 1998, right, and 1990, well, by 1999, the Nation no longer exists. But in 1998, the Nation was, pretty much, in 1997, the Nation was pretty much all black. It wasn't until 1998 that they got Owen Hart after the Hart Foundation left, and Owen was there, and Owen factors in as well in this story. And how does we mentioned about how Shawn Michaels factored in, and Lisa gave a good segue with Sexy Red. Well, how does Triple H factor in? Triple H going into 1999 is a huge star. He's over as a babyface. He's the leader of D-Generation X. We talked about in the 1998 year in review video how he and Triple H had that amazing ladder match that I said the sound was cut off when I was watching the pay-per-view. They had that amazing ladder match, and they both solidified why they would become huge stars. One leading the Nation of Domination, the other leading DX. Triple H, he couldn't be hotter. DX couldn't be hotter at this point in time, going into 1999. But as we will see as the year progressed, Triple H develops a new personality, and it's the personality that would, in my opinion, would stay with him until like his retirement, but at least his heel persona, the heel side of his personality would stay with him at least until 2006, when he again became a babyface and reformed DX with Shawn Michaels. So we'll see that happening. What about Mankind? Mankind, now he's alone again. Now he's a babyface again. Now he's developed the Mr. Sacco gimmick because Vince McMahon was in the hospital and Stone Cold Steve Austin, visited him, and Mankind, his companion, tried to visit him and cheer him up with Mr. Sacco and Nurple the Clown, right? And Mr. Sacco then becomes a part of his gimmick. But Mankind, Mick Foley, is about to have, in the beginning of 1999, the first Raw of 1999, the biggest moment in his whole career. And it intersects with WCW. Okay, let's talk a little bit about WCW and what they're doing in how they closed out 1998. I'm not sure if we mentioned in the 1998 video how they closed out 1998. Goldberg was the hottest star for them in 1998. The hottest babyface for them in 1998 with an undefeated streak. Beat everybody. Beat Hulk Hogan. Beat Raven. Beat this one. Beat that one. Beat the Giants. Right? He now, at Starrcade 1998 against Kevin Nash, he now has lost the WCW championship. Thanks to interference from Scott Hall, and we talked about the storyline that they started to do with Scott Hall with his alcoholism and how they interjected that rather than it just be okay. He turned on Kevin Nash at Slamboree. Kevin Nash is Wolfpack, and he's NWO Hollywood. Because remember, they have the two NWOs going at each other in 1998 in WCW. Rather than have that happen, what he does, what they do is like he'll come out with Vincent, his manager, and Dusty Rhodes, and he'll be drunk and he'll be throwing up on himself, right? Throwing up pea soup, right? Pretending that it's vomit, and Kevin Nash will try to save him. They have a match at Halloween Havoc 1998 that's a complete disaster, if you can call it a match. So basically, once Hulk Hogan retires, quote unquote, to run for president of the United States because Jesse Ventura is now the governor of Minnesota. This, he becomes the governor of Minnesota in 1998. Right, Hulk Hogan retires from professional wrestling, goes on the talk show circuit, and says that Hulk Hogan, remember he did an angle in the summer with Jay Leno. Hogan and DDP and Eric Bischoff. They had a mixed tag team match in at Road Wild against Jay Leno and DDP. But okay, now we're going into the end of the year, and Hogan's announcing on Jay Leno that he's running for president, that he's going to one up Jesse Ventura. The new Vince McMahon documentary talks a little bit about the beef between Jesse Ventura and Hulk Hogan and how it developed in 1986 when Jesse, during WrestleMania 2, when Jesse the Body Ventura was trying to unionize the wrestlers. And what does Hogan do? He snitches him out to Vince. So, and we talked about in the 1994 video when Hogan was coming in to WCW, Jesse was already working there and he was the top heel announcer. But he didn't want to work with Hogan, right? Because he still had that animosity. So they end up firing him and making Bobby Heenan the lead announcer. Jesse only announces one match in the whole pay-per-view in Bash at the Beach 1994, and that's the match with Dustin Rhodes against Bunkhouse Buck and Terry Funk. You know what I mean? So once Jesse leaves wrestling, he goes back into politics because he'd already been the mayor of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota earlier. He goes back into politics and he runs under the Reform Party. And keep in mind, the Reform Party was the party that Ross Perot ran with in 1992 that split the vote and was one of the main reasons why George H.W. Bush lost for re-election in 1992, other than the economy. Like, he was a sure win after he prevented the takeover of Kuwait by Iraq, and then all of a sudden, come November, he ends up losing. And Ross Perot was one of those reasons. Pat Buchanan, as well, dissatisfied with the Republican Party, had been a Republican for the longest, a speechwriter for Nixon, working heavily with the Reagan campaign in the 80s, becomes disadvantaged with conservative politics. I mean, not conservative politics, but the Republican Party, and he joins the Reform Party. So the Reform Party never really had a snowball's chance in hell, and I use that operatively because that phrase, no chance in hell, will become very important in the world of WWE. But they never really had a chance in hell to defeat either the Democrats or the Republicans. But the most that came of it was Pat Buchanan giving us a famous speech on the culture wars, right, in America, emphasizing the culture wars in America. But Jesse Ventura, he wins the governorship. So Hogan feels like he has to one-up Jesse, and he starts to go on talk shows and announce that he wants to be the president of the United States. Now, keep in mind, this is as we going into 1999. So people are taking this kind of semi-serious. people are like, well, Hogan is big enough. If Jesse can do it, Hogan's an even bigger star than Jesse. He can do it. So he has to retire from NWO Hollywood, and he hands the reins of NWO Hollywood to one of its newest members, a guy that joined back in February of last year, Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner. And one of the choices that Big Papa Pump makes is kicking Scott Hall out of NWO Hollywood. So now Scott Hall is a man without a country. He has to now prove himself to Kevin Nash and try to get back in Kevin Nash's good graces. And one of the ways he does this is by costing Goldberg the match and helping Kevin Nash win by hitting Goldberg with a taser. Also, during this match, they're doing a thing where, like, Disco Inferno was trying to be a member of the NWO, just like they were doing with Louis Spicoli earlier on in 1998. Before Louis died, Disco Inferno's trying his hardest to join the NWO, trying to be an NWO member or whatever, trying to be an NWO lackey, similar to how Sami Zayn was doing with the Bloodline before people started actually liking Sami being with the Bloodline. Well, Disco Inferno, and then Bam Bam Bigelow has come back to WCW from ECW, and he's challenging Goldberg. So those three attack Goldberg, and Goldberg loses his streak at Starrcade 1998. And according to Bobby Heenan and according to a lot of other wrestling historians, that was when WCW killed the goose that laid the golden egg, guys, because Goldberg was the biggest thing that they had, other than the NWO, which had lost its steam, and they killed it. So, sensing there's a lot of heat in this because he cheated to win, Kevin Nash issues a challenge to Goldberg for the first Nitro of 1999. That Kevin Nash will put the WCW Championship up against Goldberg in the first Nitro of 1999 in the Georgia Dome, the same place he won it from Hogan in July of last year. Hogan's going to be there campaigning, quote unquote, for his presidency. So this is a huge night. And on the WWF side, they announced The Rock versus Mankind for the WWF Championship. Now, going into the Goldberg Kevin Nash match, Goldberg is seen coming into the arena, and he's arrested. And we find out later in the evening that the arrest was for the sexual assault, or the stalking of Miss Elizabeth. Initially, it was supposed to be, we're getting there, David. Initially, it was supposed to be a rape storyline, that Goldberg was going to sexually assault Miss Elizabeth, and that's why he was going to be arrested. So preventing the main event, so Hogan would have to come out of retirement and step in. That was supposed to be the original storyline. Goldberg, of course, the uber babyface that Goldberg is, nicks that in the bud. He says, I'm not doing a sexual assault storyline. I'll stalk her, right? I'll be accused of stalking her, and then I'll be arrested, and then I'll have to come, Hogan will have to take my place, and then, we'll do that. So that's what they do. But all throughout the night, you recall when we talked about in 1995, guys, how Eric Bischoff, when he was an announcer before he joined the NWO, he would give away the endings to Monday Night Raw because Monday Night Raw was taped and Nitro was always live. He did it with the first ever main event that he went up against Vince with, which was Sid versus Shawn Michaels up against Lex Luger versus Hulk Hogan, September 11th, 1995. Right? He done this a lot. So he's no longer an announcer on Nitro, the first hour, or any hour really. He's behind the scenes. So what he tells Tony Schiavone to do is he tells Tony Schiavone to announce that the guy who wrestled here as Cactus Jack, aka McFoley, aka Mankind, is going to win their world title. And then for Tony Schiavone to sarcastically reply, huh, that'll put a lot of butts in seats. In other words, that Cactus isn't a huge draw. Mankind. So Tony Schiavone does that. Now, the fans that are watching Nitro, because Nitro's 3 hours now, and the fans that are watching Nitro and they hear this, like, oh shit, Mick Foley's gonna win the WWF Championship? Like, that's bananas, guys. Like, that's incredible. You know what I'm saying? Like I really want to see that. You know, so they start tuning off. They start tuning off WCW, and they start tuning into the WWF to watch Mick Foley win the title. Now, Bischoff didn't know this was going to happen, but so they're going along with their plan. Their plan is to have Hogan step in Goldberg's spot and finally to have the leader of NWO Hollywood after they've been feuding for months. You know, they even had a War Games. It wasn't the War Games of NWO Black and Red versus NWO Black and White because they inserted Roddy Piper in it. They inserted Diamond Dallas Page in it. And they inserted the Ultimate Warrior in it. War Games 1998. So they never had a War Games with one NWO versus another NWO, right? But they've been going at it for months now, these two versions of the NWO. And Hulk Hogan is the leader of the Black and White, and Kevin Nash is the leader of the Red and Black. So fans want to see this. So they probably want to see this more than they want to see Goldberg versus Nash. So the Georgia Dome is packed. Hogan comes out. Kevin Nash comes out with Scott Hall, all sober now, in a Wolfpack shirt. The really cool Wolfpack shirts, not with the ones with the NWO logo, with the one with the Wolf logo, all red. They face off against each other, they being Kevin Nash and Hulk Hogan. And Hulk Hogan puts his finger on Kevin Nash's chest. Kevin Nash just claps like he just died. And Hogan pins him. And there, Hogan becomes the WCW champion for the fourth time. I mean, the fifth time. Sorry, the fifth time, because I forgot he beat Luger at Roll Wild '97. But and this is called by wrestling fans the finger poke of doom. The finger poke of doom. It was all a plot by both versions of the NWO to sucker in Bill Goldberg. And Buff Bagwell comes out. Lex Luger, who's Lex Luger, who before, when the NWO was heel, he was a babyface, but he joined the Wolfpack. Keep in mind, in 1998, go back and look, Year in Review 1998 video. I talked about him joining the Wolfpack. Well, he joins them again. When Goldberg comes out, he attacks Goldberg. He's now a heel, Luger. And they're the NWO elite. all the main event guys in the NWO wear the red and black, and all the jobber guys like Stevie Ray, Brian Adams, they wear the black and they wear the black and white NWO B team, right? And you have the NWO Elite. Now, this sucks. I mean, this David can attest to this. This single-handedly was the reason, one of the main reasons why WCW died. You know what I mean? 1998 was still a good year for them. They had Karl Malone and they had Dennis Rodman at Bash at the Beach for the tag match. The Jay Leno shit, that was corny. You know what I mean? But it still brought a lot of attention to them. 98, they were still on fire. But by 1999, that's it, guys. That's the end. It's not the official end of WCW because they go on until 2001. But it's the end of WCW in a way because, like why? It made no sense. And then, like in the succeeding months, Hulk Hogan starts to dress hip hop. Like he starts to wear Jinko jeans. He starts to say "brah." He starts to like wear skull caps. You know what I mean? Like he looks completely ridiculous, Hulk Hogan, during this era. Baggy jeans Hogan. Like this was insane. You know what I mean? Thankfully, it doesn't last long because by Uncensored, he and Ric Flair do a double turn. Ric Flair coming out of Starrcade 1998, another big result was he fought Eric Bischoff for the presidency of the WWF. I mean the WCW, and he defeated Eric Bischoff for the presidency of WCW. So he's now the kayfabe president of WCW, and it'll come into a storyline where he and Arn are now using, like similar to what's happening in WWF with Vince. He and Arn are now using his power as WCW president to abuse it, and he'll become a heel. And he and Hogan will try to do the thing that Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin did at WrestleMania 13, where they'll switch sides, and Hogan will become a babyface again, and Ric Flair a heel. He even has a referee in his back. Flair even has a referee in his back pocket, Little Nate, Charles Robinson. And then Hogan will have a four-way with Ric Flair, Sting, DDP, and the Macho Man. And he'll get injured, and Hogan won't actually come back after Spring Stampede after that injury, and when he'll come back, it'll be in a tag match, a six-man where Sid, Kevin Nash, and Rick Steiner are teaming up, and this is in August, and he's teaming up with Goldberg and Sting, and he'll come back in the red and yellow. And that pretty much will be the end of Hollywood Hulk Hogan, at least in WCW. But in between that time, he will once again reign on the Macho Man's parade. While he still is Hollywood, he'll reign on the Macho Man's parade in 1999. Macho Man will, in a tag team match in a unique set of circumstances, Kevin Nash teaming with Sting to take on Sid and the Macho Man, and through that, Macho Man is able to capture the WCW title. But the night after, Hogan comes out, and Hogan defeats the Macho Man, just like he did in 1998. The night after the Macho Man wins the WCW title, Hogan comes out again and reigns on his parade. He's been doing it since 1988, guys. He's been doing it since '88. Raining on Macho Man's parade. Why, Hulk? Why? In two different promotions, 10 years in, and you're still doing this shit. He does it again in 1999. He defeats the Macho Man. Then he retires Kevin Nash. And then, like I said, by August, he's red and yellow again. And he's feuding with a heel Sting at Fall Brawl 1999. And then WCW was shaken up again in October when Ed Ferrara and Vince McMahon, Ed Ferrara, and Vince Russo leave the WWF and head over to be head writers for WCW. And the first event they book is Halloween Havoc. And during that event, the main event was supposed to be Sting versus Hulk Hogan, and Hogan comes out in street clothes and lays down for Sting. A bizarre set of events, but a prelude to something that would happen a year after in 2000 between Jeff Jarrett and Hulk Hogan, which we'll talk about when we get to 2000. But yes, WCW is pretty weird. And by the way, that Spring Stampede event, that was the four-way. That was DDP, Sting, DDP, Sting, Ric Flair, and Hogan. And that was the event where DDP wins the WCW title for the first time. So Hogan's out with an injury, but it's good for Diamond Dallas Page as he becomes the WCW champion for the first time. But anyway, that's WCW. They changed the logo. Shit is really changing in WCW. They're trying to shake things up because what they did, David says, in his mind, he won the WCW championship, not Hulk Hogan, on January 1st, 1999. Exactly. It sucked. It killed WCW. But now, going to the WWF. We're back in the WWF. Shawn Michaels comes back as the commissioner. Now, because they formed the corporation, and the current commissioner is Sergeant Slaughter, and he's in the back pocket of Vince. He's in the back pocket of Vince. So they want somebody neutral, and the neutral person they get is Shawn Michaels, former DX member, former DX leader. But it's a match between Test, who was Motley Crue's bodyguard, I think, or something, right? Working with Motley Crue. Motley Crue had just appeared on Raw, whatever. And they hired Test. He has a match with X-Pac, and during his match with X-Pac, Shawn Michaels turns to the corporation. Now he's the corporate commissioner now. Now they got both commissioners in their back pocket. He does it because he's angry with Triple H for kicking him out of DX. This doesn't last long. Eventually, he goes against Vince. He makes decisions that Vince doesn't like, and he gets kicked out of the corporation. And we don't really see Shawn Michaels until August in the first SmackDown when he referees the Iron Man match between Triple H and The Rock. The first SmackDown, my birthday, August 26, 1999, my 14th birthday. But yeah, so we're heading into Royal Rumble. The storyline for the Royal Rumble is that Austin has no chance in hell of winning because he drew a low number, and Vince McMahon is in the Royal Rumble himself. Now, as David brought up, spoiler alert, Vince wins the 1999 Royal Rumble by last eliminating Steve Austin. Now they're in a conundrum. They're in a conundrum because The Rock is the WWF champion, and since 1993 we talked about it. The WWF champion uh, faces the winner of the Royal Rumble, right? But how? When they're both in the corporation together and they're both heels. At first, we don't know if The Rock's going to be the WWF champion because he has an I Quit match with Mankind. Mankind going into the Royal Rumble as the champion. Now when we talked about 1989 and we talked about the name Akeem. I mentioned Barry Blaustein, one of the writers on Coming to America, worked closely with Eddie Murphy, and when he was on Saturday Night Live, and he, a huge wrestling fan as well. The WWF has agreed to work with him on this documentary about behind the scenes, a year behind the scenes of WWF. Both ECW and WWF have decided to work with him, and he releases the movie Beyond the Mat. And one of the events he's filming is the Royal Rumble, right, in Anaheim, California. And keep in mind, it's the I Quit match. Now, how are you going to get him? The story of this is like, how are you going to get a guy like Mankind? Mankind, by the way, wins the WWF Championship from The Rock with help from Stone Cold Steve Austin and with help from DX. And Michael Cole, who's newly joined the company not so long before that, he has one of the best calls in his career. Early Michael Cole was pretty good. He says, all those years at Motel 6s, Mick Foley has finally done it. It was a great night, Mick Foley becoming the WWF champion for the first time ever. But, of course, he has to lose it because we're headed to the Royal Rumble. In the Collision course, the match fans want to see is the match that's going to main event WrestleMania 15, and that's The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. So, they have an I Quit match. But like I said, the story behind it is, well, how are you going to get Mankind, who likes pain, who indulges in pain, how are you going to get him to say the words, I quit? Well, he does an interview where he says, I will never say I quit. I will never say I quit. I quit. Right? And then Shane McMahon tapes that. And then that's the audio they use for him to surrender. Right? Some bullshit, a convoluted finish. But during the course of the match, The Rock is waffling Foley with tons and tons of chair shots, and Foley's handcuffed. Right? And The Rock is just, and they're showing this on the pay-per-view, but they're showing it on in the Beyond the Mat documentary too, and you're like, oh my god, Foley is fucking like look what he's going through and shit. And this is before CTE, before we knew anything about concussions and what they could do to a person, right? Even though Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince don't believe in CTE anyway. But anyway, bashing Foley, and Foley just not giving up. Then finally they play this tape in The Rock. Now this was during The Rock's, like he would wear this like vest era, like he wore a top because he was getting pec reduction, a surgery. He was getting like surgery on his breast, basically his man chest, because the steroids had caused him to experience gynecomastia. He was growing tits. You know what I mean? He didn't want that, so obviously he's surgery. So, but yeah, The Rock is the new WWF champion. They have a Super Bowl edition, a halftime fight, an empty arena match between he and Foley actually wins. Then The Rock wins it back. So it's Mankind Rock, Mankind Rock, Mankind Rock. Leading into the suspense of WrestleMania 15. But What about Vince? Well, Shawn Michaels comes out and announces, listen, since you forfeited, Vince comes out, he forfeits his spot as the number one contender at WrestleMania. And he says, well, since you forfeited, I guess the second guy that was in the ring that night, Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's the number one contender. So that's the match for WrestleMania 15. But before that, we go into St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Memphis, Tennessee, the Memphis Pyramid. And this will be the first time, this is February 14th, 1999. This will be the first time ever that Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin fought each other one-on-one in a match. Remember that one Raw where they broke the 83-week winning streak of Nitro? It was scheduled to fight with Vince having one hand tied behind his back against Austin. Remember they did the training montages with Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe training Vince, right? But that didn't happen because interference from Mick Foley, right? So they've never actually squared off one-on-one. They've had these back and forth, funny incidents happen between them, but they've never squared off one-on-one. But this time, in a cage, Vince has a new cool theme song, the No Chance in Hell theme song, because he's saying to Stone Cold Steve Austin, he said, you got no chance. He told him at the Royal Rumble, you got no chance in hell, right? No chance in hell. And that becomes his theme. And they have a cage match. They have a traditional cage match, not a Hell in a Cell match, a traditional big bars cage match. And Vince took crazy bumps, for this. And it was awesome. But one element that was introduced into this was the Big Show. The Big Show, Paul White. Now, who is the Big Show? Big Show is the Giant. The person that was a homegrown WCW star. We talked about him when he first debuted in 1995 in the year in review, facing Hulk Hogan, his first match in, winning the WCW championship under special stipulation in 1995. He was heavily misused in WCW. He was NWO, then he wasn't NWO, then he was NWO again. So going into 1999, he's NWO still, but he still has kayfabe animosity or beef with Kevin Nash, and Kevin Nash is back reunited with Hulk Hogan. So they're like, well, there's only room for one giant in the NWO. So they have a match on Nitro, and there's a loser leave town match, and of course, Paul White, the Giant, loses. And he's off to sign with the WWF. And he appears next to Vince McMahon. Now, initially, they didn't know what to call him. They couldn't call him the Giant because it's trademarked by WCW, right? So they come at first, they reference him as Big Nasty, right? Big Nasty, which is a stupid name. So then they come up with the words, the Big Show. And what is the Big Show? The initials for the Big Show. TBS, the station that airs WCW. A knock on WCW, the Big Show's name. But they give him a new theme song. Well, it's the Big Show, and we finally think, oh well, he's gonna get treated really well, because during the time that he was in WCW, Vince McMahon would go around to guys like Meltzer and other dirt sheet guys, and he would say, WCW doesn't know what to do with a Giant. If I had my hands on Paul White, who was this generation's Andre, I would know what to do with him. I would market him. I would push him to the moon. I will make him a star. Does he do that? Not really. We'll talk about it, because he has ups and downs this year, basically. A lot of ups and downs. So he's debuting at that pay-per-view. He comes out from under the ring, the same way that The Undertaker did in '96 in the Bret Hart Diesel cage match. He comes from under the ring, tries beating up Stone Cold, but despite the interference, Stone Cold overcomes the odds, and Stone Cold Steve Austin is headed to WrestleMania to take on The Rock for the WWF Championship, trying to win it for the second time. But what about the Big Show? Well, he'll have at WrestleMania a match with Mankind, and during this match, it will determine who will be the referee for the main event. Will Mankind be the referee who's enemies with The Rock and the Corporation, or will the Big Show, who's an ally of The Rock and the Corporation, be the referee? Well, the Big Show loses at WrestleMania, and Vince turns on him. Reminiscent to me, when I watched it, it was reminiscent of when Bobby Heenan turned on Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 6. We talked about it in the 1990 review video, in the 1990 year in review video 9 years earlier. He starts slapping Big Show around and shit, and Big Show was like, wait a minute, I'm a fucking giant. And he just slaps the shit out of Vince. You know what I mean? He becomes a babyface. And he starts his run in WWE. But a lot is happening at this WrestleMania, though. A couple weeks before, China turns on DX, and she allies herself with Kane and the Corporation. She turns on Triple H. But at WrestleMania, in a European title match between Shane McMahon and X-Pac, Triple H turns on DX. And Triple H is now a Corporation member. Huh? So it was all a ruse to begin with. It was all a ruse to begin with. That Triple H and China were beefing with one another. They were both in the pocket of Vince McMahon and in the pocket of the Corporation. So now Triple H is a heel. This would lead to the dispersion of D-Generation X. D-Generation X is ended. As we head out of WrestleMania, but good news. Stone Cold Steve coming out of WrestleMania 15, Stone Cold Steve in Philly, Stone Cold Steve Austin is your new WWF champion going into WrestleMania. Now, The Undertaker, what's he doing? He has now become dark and sinister. He has formed his Ministry of Darkness. Midian and the Acolytes, Farouk and Bradshaw. You know, they have left the Jackal. Cyrus the Virus, a.k.a. the Jackal, right? Don Callis has left the WWF. He's no longer there. He was the manager of Farouk and Bradshaw. You know, after Farouk left the Nation, after Bradshaw left the New Blackjacks, he formed the Acolytes, their group. But now The Undertaker has taken them under the wing. The Undertaker had Southern Justice, aka the Godwins, have broken up, and Midian has become part of Undertaker's group. Mabel, who has returned for the first time since 1995 at the Royal Rumble, is now under the control of The Undertaker. The Undertaker is collecting all these souls to be part of his group. But one of the things he wants to do is to kidnap Stephanie McMahon. And he abducts Stephanie McMahon. There's this famous thing where he got Stephanie in the back car. He's like, "Where to, Stephanie?" Right? And he's claiming that he is directed by a higher power. And for months, people are going to be like, well, where's this higher power? Where's this higher power? Later, we'll reveal what the higher power in fact is and who I thought the higher power was going to be and should have been. But anyway, the Undertaker has formed the Ministry of Darkness, and because he is doing what is doing to the McMahon family, the corporation steps in and they have their henchman, the Big Boss Man, take on the Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell match at WrestleMania. Now, this Hell in a Cell match at WrestleMania is one of the worst Hell in a Cell matches in WWE history. Up until this point, they've only had two. They had The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels at Bad Blood 97, which was a classic. And they had Mankind and Undertaker at King of the Ring 98, which was an even better classic. This is infamous too. This is famous too, this one. WrestleMania 15, because it's on a WrestleMania. First one on a WrestleMania. And it sucks. It's horrible. They hanged the Big Boss Man from the cage by a noose. I mean, it couldn't get any worse. And another thing that couldn't get worse with this was the fucking Brawl for All culmination. Now, remember what I was talking about in August of 1998. We talked about it in the 1998 video. Vince Russo, because Bradshaw's bullying people backstage, he has the brilliant idea that he's going to have wrestlers who are not trained fighters. Keep in mind, UFC is banned all across the country now. You know, in most states, except like Dothan, Alabama, or whatever, right? Most states because of John McCain's campaigning. But it's still popular in people's minds. So much so that UFC guys like Dan Severn and Ken Shamrock, they had to come to the WWF. Dan Severn is the NWA champion. He comes to the WWF in '98. They had to come to the WWF because there was no money in MMA, right? And Shamrock came in '97. So, so Russo still sees a market out there for it, and because Bradshaw's being a big mouth, bullying guys and saying if it was real he'd beat up anybody, he decides to have these mid card talents go against each other in a boxing match. You know, a series of boxing matches, and they wanted Dr. Death Steve Williams to win because Dr. Death Steve Williams is being brought in by Jim Ross. And he's Jim Ross's boy. He's been his boy since the Mid-South days, right? The two Oklahoma guys, whatever. And Jim Ross has a lot of faith in Dr. Death Steve Williams, and they say, well, wait a minute. Steve Austin's real name is Steve Williams, and there's money in the Steve Austin Dr. Death feud in 1999, perhaps, right? But it doesn't happen because in 1998, Bart Gunn of the Smoking Guns, well, at that time, the Smoking Guns was already broken up. They broke up in '96. He was at that time part of the NWA faction in WWF and part of the new Midnight Express. He was Bodacious Bart. And he knocks out Dr. Death. And since it's real, you know, they got to roll with it. And that allows Jim Ross, who's battling his Bell's palsy once again, to come back and turn heel and kick like Michael Cole in the nuts and curse out Bart Gunn and shit. It was a really weird storyline, but they do nothing with it. They sit on it until WrestleMania when they decide they're going to have Butterbean, an actual fighter, with Vinny Pazienza, an actual fighter, as the referee, and actual judges at ringside to judge this match. Butterbean versus Bart Gunn. Needless to say, within a matter of seconds, Butterbean knocks the shit out of Bart Gunn, and that's the end of Bart Gunn's push. Now, the saving grace of this shit is that we get to see the last appearance of Gorilla Monsoon on WWF TV. Gorilla Monsoon had stopped being the on-camera president of the WWF in mid 1997, replaced by Sergeant Slaughter. as the figurehead, right? And now replaced by Shawn Michaels. But because of his diabetes and stuff, but he looked really different. And it wouldn't be long this year, later on in this year, we would say goodbye to the voice of many of our childhoods, especially if we grew up in the 1980s, of Gorilla Monsoon. And those who grew up in the Northeast before then as a babyface in the 70s and as a heel in the 19s, and as a heel and a foil to Bruno Sammartino in the 1960s. Gorilla Monsoon was different things to different generations of fans. But we said goodbye to Gorilla this year, and that was the last time we saw him on TV. And of course, his longtime broadcast partner and real life friend, Bobby the Brain Heenan, was working in WCW when he passed away. And the asshole, Eric Bischoff, did not want to allow Heenan to pay even the smallest amount of tribute to Gorilla Monsoon on TV, despite the fact that Gorilla Monsoon never worked in WCW. The only time he appeared behind a WCW screen was during Black Saturday. He never worked in WCW at all, but still he was Heenan's friend and he contributed to the business. So they let him do a 5-minute thing, but we later found out that it was begrudgingly, with gritted teeth. Bischoff didn't want to do it. Fuck Bischoff for that shit. You know what I mean? He didn't even know Gorilla. So WrestleMania 15 is remembered precisely for that Butterbean and Bart Gunn thing. Like, that was the worst mistake ever. If they wanted Dr. Death to win it, just work it. Like, just work it. Fans didn't know what to make of it. Later on in 2020, they would bring something similar back with Raw Underground with Shane idea. That was a work, but that went nowhere either. I don't know who that was supposed to get over. I think we're supposed to get over that guy, David Kato, aka Babatunde, right? As like when Apollo Crews was Nigerian, he was supposed to be Apollo Crews's like bodyguard or whatever in 2020, 2021. I don't know, but that never went anywhere either. You know what I mean? Like now they're like merged with UFC, so if they want to do anything, they could do something similar. But it never went. But we did have in 1999, jumping around a little bit, Lions Den matches and dungeon matches between various people, between Owen Hart and Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn and Ken Shamrock. So we had some unique sort of stuff in 1999 as well. But the next pay-per-view, we'll see The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. They'll continue to feud until I'm only doing this half, guys. I'm coming back in another half, another day, because I have stuff to do. But I appreciate you guys. Thank you, David, for contributing. Thank you, Lisa, for contributing. We will do the Whitney Houston video when you're ready. Love you guys.